All right, folks. This is a rather tall task to try to tackle here in the hurdle hop over, but I'm trying my best to quantify and explain you tempo in Flesh and Blood and understanding the flow of the game. Because, in short, it is value with context, but we'll dive a lot deeper in this one to this, and I'll try to stay with a good flow, talking, reading notes, and presenting this presentation. So bear with me. All right, here we go. Not that button, that one. All right. So what is tempo? It is the momentum of the game that just allows the player to act more than react. So it's more than just efficiency in the value. And really, with the player acting more than reacting, it's like aggressor versus defender. But tempo is not just only offensive value. There is merit to like defensive tempo as well. Think of sinks and think of like sink denying burn up shot on hit. That is huge, going 1 card to 2 cards and negating opponent's pressure that way and gaining more pressure yourself. So it's about action economy as well, like how well are you able to present action points and just convert your hand. Because at like base value, we could think our hand can extract this much value, offensive plus defensive. But of course, our opponent interacts with this one. So, for example, if you send a Command and Conquer against the Guardian, they're doing 2 card 6, and they block 3 and move on. Send their own 2 card 9 or whatever. It's a game that they want to play, really. And we'll dive deeper into the understanding the roles later on. But if you do the same play with the CNC against a heavy aggro deck like Syndra, now you negate a lot of their damage because they have weaker links, they attack for less, the cards maybe block for 2, would have attacked for 4. So you get to negate their hand's value. So it's like this base race against X amount of value where you interact with your opponent's hand value, and within context of course hands presenting lethal and things changing between life disparities. But yeah. We can go to the next slide, I think. So the core concept is block to preserve life, to get more time and see your power cards, because it's just, not all the cards are worth 3 in this game, right? You also have like card synergies, like Aura would have Arc Lightning with 5 card hand, then the card's value goes way up. And in Auxilio, you would have like a Blast to Oblivion with Greaves combo, or Gun Flash with Greaves combo. Now you get to like do a lot of synergy and extract a lot more value than you're supposed to do. So understanding what are opponent's power turns and your power turns, and through navigating like the turn clock with the value as well in mind is very important. So taking damage to send back pressure, blocking and attacking right time with right numbers, like I said about the power cards, and understanding what decks want to do. This is very important. Recognizing power turns, said before, and understanding how many turns left within the game. For example, here, if you are at 10 life, opponent did not block at all. We sent them to like 10 life as well. Game even. Well, not really, because their offense with 5 cards or 4 cards usually is able to do and present at 10 damage, which means that if we haven't been able to use Greaves yet and do our explosive tempo pivot combo turn, then we have to block to stay alive. And now, because we have to block, our cards do a lot less than they would do with the combo, so we are not within that game anymore able to do a powerful pivot like this. Am I recording? Okay, I'm recording to make sure. Yeah, so value plus turn context and order. I'm also later proposing a little bit of a math formula. It's really hard because it's quite contextual, and probably a lot of math people will go like, yeah, that's wrong. But I'm proposing take it, understand it, and improve upon it. So just to give you a context and perspective and a little bit more quantified thing than basing on feelings. So maybe next time you go to an armory and you start the game and it just feels bad all the time, now you hopefully understand why it feels bad or feels good all the time. The little intricate things in Flesh and Blood just snowball so much. The first turns are super important. So here we can do a little case study. Syndra versus Auxilio. Syndra is just an aggressive, very fragile deck that relies on long chains. Wants to do 4 or 5 cards because they want to present that Mask of Momentum hit at all times to gain extra card for their turn, so extra offensive value. And the way we can interact with that, because we're not able to keep up, just if we just throw 5 cards at each other at all times, we'll lose that race, right? Most of the decks will lose that race. So what we try and do is disrupt their hand, do not let them have that full 4 or 5 card hand grip. We try to block efficiently, so do double blocks to deny the Mask of Momentum on hit. Then we might be able to race back. Disruption would be something like, of course, Mind Warp, CNC. Mostly just Mind Warp, because I will discuss this more later, but understanding that opponent equipment suits gives Auxilio especially different access to attack and interact with the game and your opponent to attack their weaknesses. And we of course want to find the Grease combo to push that one huge tempo swing turn. So signs of tempo advantage. What are those? Life disparity, quite clear cut. You are 25 to 8 up. You don't need to ever block with your cards. You can just keep presenting on hit lethals and make opponent block awkwardly, because not all cards just want to be blocked and do even block that well. So you get to act, opponent has to react. Yeah, it's generally for a lot of decks. Well, no, I'm not gonna say anything because that's just not a take really, because there are very good reactive decks in Flesh and Blood as well. I was more so thinking about, like, a reacting deck that would be fine, just always reacting. Is a like in Magic, for example, you have a control deck and you try to react what your opponent is doing and denying them what they want to do until you find that little pivot later and just flip the game over. But there is decks like that in Flesh and Blood where you attack with like a deck damage axis your opponent, or for example Florian, you just play 4D reacts and your opponent doesn't leak any damage. You get to have additional values out of your D reacts, and then you send back your felling. I don't know how Florian got 6 cards in their hand, but you get the idea. So how do you create tempo then? So like I said, the first turns are very, very important. So you force your opponent to inefficient card usage, like I gave with the example on blocking a CNC. That is inefficient card usage for a lot of the decks. Sending a Mind Warp at your opponent, or etchings that they want to deny, but they do not have a blue in hand. That is very inefficient card usage, because, for example, very extreme example, I guess if Fang has AB1, you send a Mind Warp for 5, Mind Warp for 4, Mind Warp for 3. So 1 over the surge. They AB1, deny the damage, deny the on hit. Fine, but they'll probably lose like 3 to 4 value out of that 1 HP2, even though they saved the value in the card that they would have lost anyways on the Mind Warp trigger. They still lost, well, they were inflicted damage. So you, in essence, gain tempo there, because the life disparity grows further and further. Or closest, but, interacting with life. So you use on hits effects and split damage to create tempo. The split damage effect I discussed earlier with the Fang example. and on-hit effects are very powerful at creating tempo. For example, Burn Up Shock and Channel Lake Valley. Opponent wants to really deny your on-hit extra effects, so they need to block with their cards inefficiently, or block with cards that would be more efficient on offense because they cannot keep on racing against the card or the on-hits that you have, or they would be the first one to die if you always send 5 cards back to each other. That's what I'm trying to propose here. I think that what happens if you always send 4 to 5 cards back to each other, and how can you interrupt that one and flip the turn order where you can be the pressure and opponent has to react to you. So preserving value with efficient blocks is also very important. There is a lot of tempo to be gained by blocking, of course, and comes back to value. Like I said with the example on Sync, denying a 4 attack, hitting you with the on hit on Burn Up Shock. So that's good. Also, just a 4 block being a better value than a 3 that is like the median of the cards. That is efficient blocking. Using Surcharge spells to attack hand, like with the Fang example, but more on this in a way where when you attack physical to your opponent, they can always decide to block if they want to with the worst cards out of their hand. But when you attack your opponent with Arcane, they have to pitch for resources for that. So usually the resource cards are not the worst cards out of their hand. So attacking that axis can be very devastating to your opponent. For example, having KO or any brute really, just they are tuned to have 1 blue per hand. If you attack a meaningful search effect that they really need and want to deny, and they give their blue for that, having 2 to 3 reds left in their hand is way worse than having a blue and a swing big in hand. So this way you get to deny a lot of value out of opponent's hands when they have to roll on their turn. And of course, forcing cards out of the hand. But this comes again just forcing inefficient card usage. This is more relevant on Auxilia's side, not really like 1-to-1 on tempo, but Auxilia like decks that do want to get like a space, because they have that very combo-y explosive pressure turn, tempo pivot turn. When you force cards out of your opponent's hands, they do not get to pressure you as much back. Like the Syndra example, like Assassin having 2 cards left in hand is probably not gonna be Bond's turn. Or then it's a very face-up Bond's turn. But you get the idea, right? So then you have a lot more leeway to decide what you can do and want to do with your cards that are left in your hand, that you usually want to just stay on pressure, because this is an Auxilia's lens, right? But when you handshake down the lives with your opponent, you get to do your Greaves turn, you go both down to like sub 10 life. You having shocks to essentially have 1 turn fast a kill, reversing the turn order and clock there, as well as having Arcane that your opponent cannot very well interact with and always leaks net damage, true damage, because it's sort of dominated, will just force the game to be in a very favored position for you, because the opponent has to keep that in mind and keep blocking your the normal physical damage hits too, so that they wouldn't die and go to a range of shock. So understanding the roles and what the decks want to do. This is very bare bones example. Each deck has their nuance and power cards and angles and axes to that they want to do and play with. This game is very deep and cannot be very crystallized into one simple things, but yeah. So aggro, they force tempo early on and tries to keep it. That's why they always want to go second, because when you go second, you get to have the first offense turn, and the person that needs to react first is having down tempo. Just basically it. So decks like this would be Syndra, Fi, ninjas. Yeah, just, aura. And how to interact with them is that the disruption just stops them and will not stop, but slow them down and makes them do very inefficient things with their hands, as well as plugging out on hits. Really important. Then you can also just deck damage them out because they burn through their cards very fast. They don't pitch at all. So if you're like very defensive deck, you can just deny their on hits, just deny their damage, maybe heal up a bit and just keep trading cards, because you probably pitch to something like your weapon, so you get to keep more cards in your deck than your opponent, and then they fatigue you out and just die. So next is mid-range. Yes, I think mid-range is real. In Flesh and Blood, it's just pure numbers, the long grind, how I would pretty much summarize it up. The fairest decks that they are, heavy hitters meta, think about Hatch's Dory. That deck just grinded crazy value every turn, just had the good values over and over and over again, never bending, never doing anything too crazy, just Valiant Dynamos +1 on every turn. And that's what they try to do. They try to block and attack efficiently, as true as they can to the value system, the Hamilton value system, right? Then there is a category that is like kind of hard to quantify, or well, put like in a title. Is a setup combo and tempo, which is like Osilio and Vincent. I would also put there, maybe Dash IO as well. So they play around a little bit of cycles and setup, where not every card is meant to point at your opponent offensively or like defensively. You do play like items, you play auras that trigger next turn, and you try to craft your hands a bit, put cards in the banish to make white links with enough rune chance. You get the idea. They try to set up these biggest turns and also control tempo very well. Now, here's my hot take. I think Osilio is the best deck in the game at manipulating and controlling tempo. He's also very easy to, well, not very easy, but he's weak to being disrupted and manipulated back as well. Quite like fragile in that sense. But what I mean by this is that you can attack with different axes your opponent's hand and make them do very inefficient plays with their cards, as well as you get to preserve information, because a lot of the things you do is in instant speed. So again, this comes down to making opponent make inefficient plays around what you can do. Also, Arcane very hard to interact with. You can force with Mind Warp then the tempo back to yourself. You always have the Greaves that force the tempo back to you. So you can give leeways, do setups a bit, play value, and then when given that time and right moment, you strike and get back to tempo. Like for example, Syndra, all you need to do is really that, just a little bit for attacks and send a Mind Warp. Nothing too crazy. 3-4 card hand does totally fine job at comboing in Syndra context. But if you're playing like against Florian that wants to block more, you try to set up more and do mini combos and a big combo with like Blast and Arcanes, because all the decks are sort of like, all decks have certain cap how much they can block. So going over that rather than going into that is how you want to play. This was also realized very well within the context of pitch stacking Kano, because at Cowling and Battle Warsaw we were able to, I don't remember what was the win rate. It was like 17 games, 15-2 or 14-3 successfully stacked KOs with pitch stack and Kano. And me and my buddy, and like that shouldn't be possible if the KO was aware at all what was going on. But if they would just always went wild ride in the swing big, that was very easy to block out and just craft the pitch stack that didn't need to be massive in order to win the game. But if they did like something like a little bit of attacking and do a cast bonds into Arsenal 5-card hand, stack the BRBs a little bit, maybe later. To a couple of turns like this, it's over very quick. And then there is control, which is just pure defensive tempo, really. So they start really slow. Or well, all the decks start like super, like at their strongest, basically. But what they do is like they just react rather than a slow start. Maybe I've phrased it a little wrong. Slow start in the sense that their damage output is not coming at you, so you have like no pressure, just infinite time to set up your things. As the aggressor playing against a control deck, then they want to disrupt the tempo reversal or negate the value out of your hand, and deal a little deck damage and just overall grind value. So in Australia, understanding how opponent needs to block because of the split damage and the on hits, this I have mentioned a couple of times already. You can also manipulate the value and tempo of the game with the same exact thing. But the value always isn't what you can or want to do either. There is like an example of you having 3 cards in your hand. You have Arsenal Flittering Charge, and you have a yellow Blast to Oblivion in your hand. There is a Embodiment of Lightning token on the field, and you have a Comet Storm in your hand. Now you would be tempted, if you're very married to Hamilton's value system, you'd be tempted to send the Flittering Charge, and then the Blast Oblivion, right? And then Arsenal your Comet Storm, or cycle it to Arsenal the next card. But that isn't always necessarily true. Sometimes it's just a lot better. Actually, quite a lot of times, probably all the time there, it would be just better to send the Comet Storm for 5 value, which is worse, but it's better in the whole game's context, because now you get to keep your embodiment for next turn, so this comes into playing for a little bit of setup, at the same time as you are attacking a different angle and axis at your opponent, so you're making like actual net damage there, and your opponent can only block with 1 card out of their hand. If they're like Guardian, and they're left with 4 cards after that turn, rather than 3 cards, the total value that comes out of their hand is most likely to be gonna be worse. Little tip here as well is that when you are defending against opponents, just keep looking at how they pitch their cards. Then you can almost always, or most of the time, see what their turn is going to be look like. But nowadays there's a lot of decks that don't pitch quite at all. So yeah. So Greaves combo, it's a tempo pivot. But rather than thinking about Greaves to be a must combo Stormstriders-esque thing, like Kano would be, no. It's like Super Snapdragon Scalers to me. Like, you just use them to gain tempo, or fix your hand to gain a lot of action points and use the instants for value. It's very contextual what type of combo, how big of a combo you need, and what type of damage you want out of your combo to force your opponent in the back foot, and you get the tempo back. And the usage of that just comes from understanding the matchup, as well as just how the tempo of the game goes. But I think this should be a good lesson for that specifically. So then we got a little bit of math theory here that I mapped out a bit here. So let's look at it a bit more. So tempo is value, but within context. There is turn cycles left. There is as well as pressure rolls, inefficient card usage. I'm forcing that one. You got turn orders, basically meaning just who is the one pressuring and who is the one reacting, who is one acting, who is one reacting. Turn orders / turn clock, yeah. Tempo clock as well, maybe you could use that term. Setup is, of course, negative tempo. You're banking value and power for next turn, but you are giving up pressure doing that because you're not using your card for value that turn, right? So playing full sigils of brilliance is down because you're a cheater like that, is pretty good play for next turn. But now you give the honest to opponent and they can do whatever they want with you. Sometimes good if you're playing against assassin. Probably not good getting bonus there, but you still get to draw 4 cards, albeit random. Not always good, but you get the idea, right? So how I like to think, like I mentioned earlier, is the game progress towards axe value, which where like axe is sort of like life total, right? Just doing net damage towards that one. So here's the little formula that I tried to craft. So it's like tempo equals to damage represented minus damage blocked, which equals to net damage, right? If you send 14 and opponent block 6, you have done 8 damage, so you get the 8 value there. Then there's cardinal value, like for example, from that 14 damage, 4 was a mind warp, and it made your opponent do very poor. Or say you had CLV on the ground, you attacked with Blast to Oblivion for 4, your opponent blocks 2 cards for 6 because they had to do that, no armor left anymore. You did not value out of their cards, so you made them block 6 and 4. They lost 2 value, really. Then there is the disruption bonus as well. If you ended the combo on Mind Warp and the Mind Warp Surge hit through, they just took it because they can't deny it, so I have to just lose the card. They disruption bonus for us +3, right? Because 3 is the average card. There's also more context to that, like you could put weights to each of these values in a way where disruption bonus is probably for Asolia a little bit more than just the base 3. So it would be like 3 times 1.2 maybe, because opponent is losing pressure there and you're getting more time to do your explosive turns and setups. But it gets like very nuanced after that. Maybe somebody is gonna be able to cook like an awesome fucking formula here, and that would be great to see for tempo to quantify it. But yeah, so the cardinal value, like I said, average value minus the actual value of what the cards in the hand would have done. And now, as our equations came to 13 with that example, because we presented 14 damage, opponent blocked 6, leaked 8, cardinal +2, disruption +3, 13. And then our opponent now, since they block with 2 cards and they lost 1 card, they have 1 card left. Thinking no arsenal here. So then they send that card back at us, attacking for 4. Say it's a snatch, they got lucky out of the Mind Warp. We block 3 there for some very wild reason. They didn't deny any value out of our card because it blocked 3, it did its job quite well. Unless, of course, it's like a gun flash, then the card denial value would be +1 because the offense would be better on it. But we probably are not blocking anyways if we can use it. So cardinal value 0. Very contextual again. And disruption bonus, they get +3 on it. It's not technically a disruption, but it gets like, it's like an on-hit bonus, I suppose. They get card out of it, which is 3, and they are solid. So that would be total value of 4. Now this, of course, like snowballs and leaves on. Now where our next turn is 1 card less. And since we did an arsenal, our offense is probably looking something like 8 or 9. And then opponent needs to block less and they can attack more back. Usually this like ebb and flow thing. So it's hard to quantify. But I tried to quantify here in like DR next, meaning damage represented next, equals to what is your next hand size times average value, which is usually 3, but I guess like nowadays, because you have a lot of like 4 attacks, it would be more so on like 3.2, 3.3 if you want to get like really technical about it. But yeah, just round up at 2, 3, whatever. So, and that hand next value equals to 4 minus the cards you lost when your opponent disrupted or made you block. Then you add to that draws and arsenal. So that would be a hand next, and then that sort of like lives on from there, this type of like bonus. And the difference between this like tries to race towards that, say 50 value, 40 value, and which one gets there first. It's not that clear cut, but it paints like the generic picture that which one gets there first wins. So yeah. Then deck also like, you know, it's a 60 cards, so it like gives like 180 to 200 value, I guess. And like what counts to that is just, you know, like I said, dealing a block of damage, eating blocks, getting guard advantages there, where opponent just blocks more cards, loses pressure, loses tempo out of their deck. There's also like, or cards out of the deck. There's also a variable in that where you have like card advantage in your hand, because this ties to inefficient blocking. If our opponent is, if our opposing Syndra is allowed to keep the 5 cards, they have like quite a big card advantage in their hand compared to 5 card hand that is just all 3 blocks, because they are able to present better offense. But if you are able to like deny a Arc Lightning out of Aura's hand, now they lose a lot of card advantage, because now their average value of the hand drops down, and I mean, yours is better. So there's also that one, right? So final thoughts here. Tempo isn't purely about speed and value, it's also the efficiency and pressuring to limit the opponent's options. You don't want to play with your opponent, you want to play around them. Don't play their game, make them play your game. Make them play the exact game that they don't want to play. And when you feel good, and if you feel not pressured, and you feel like your opponent is pressured, you know you're having an up tempo and time of your life. So, lastly, I just want to thank again my lovely patrons and everyone who has bought the masterclass guide over in Metafy. I hope all this has helped you. Keep in mind that they are not keeping any information. Everything is here in my videos as well, but it's just a lot more yapping there and concentrated information, deeper information. So yeah, thanks for the support a lot. I hope this video was informal. Dude, this was a hard one and really wanted to do more for it, but maybe I'll do like part 2 later. But until then, have a good time with your PQs.